Waiter told Alain Delon this restaurant is too expensive, then learned he owns it. Staff went silent. This is the incredible true story of how one moment of class prejudice and economic assumption at one of Paris's most prestigious restaurants led to one of the most embarrassing revelations in French hospitality history, proving that true wealth often chooses discretion over display, and that sometimes the most powerful lessons about respect and humility come when our assumptions about people's economic status are shattered by the quiet authority of those who understand that genuine success doesn't need to announce itself. October 15, 1975, Le Grand Véfour, nestled in the gardens of the Palais Royal in the heart of Paris, was preparing for another evening of serving the most discerning clientele in French society. The legendary restaurant, which had been a gathering place for French cultural and political elite since 1784, represented the absolute pinnacle of Parisian culinary sophistication and social prestige. The restaurant's reputation was built not just on its extraordinary cuisine, but on its ability to provide an atmosphere of refined elegance that attracted writers, politicians, artists, and business leaders who valued both exceptional food and the kind of discreet luxury that allowed important conversations to take place away from public scrutiny. The dining room itself was a masterpiece of 18th-century French design, with gilded moldings, crystal chandeliers, and hand-painted ceiling murals that created an atmosphere of timeless sophistication. The tables were set with Limoges porcelain, Baccarat crystal, and silverware that had been crafted by the finest French artisans, while the service staff moved with the kind of practiced elegance that had made French hospitality legendary throughout the world. On this particular October evening, the restaurant was fully booked with its usual collection of distinguished guests. Politicians discussed matters of state over expertly prepared coq au vin, while celebrated authors debated literary theories between courses of perfectly executed French classics. The atmosphere was one of intellectual sophistication and cultural refinement that represented the best of Parisian society. Henri Dubois, the restaurant's maître d'hôtel, had been managing Le Grand Véfour's front-of-house operations for nearly 15 years. His combination of professional expertise and social sensitivity had made him invaluable in maintaining the restaurant's reputation for providing exceptional service to even the most demanding clientele. Working under Henri's supervision was a team of experienced waiters who shared his commitment to maintaining the restaurant's standards of excellence. However, the staff also included newer employees who were still learning the subtle arts of French hospitality and the importance of treating every guest with equal respect regardless of their appearance or apparent economic status. Among these newer employees was Jacques Moreau, who had been hired just 6 months earlier as part of the restaurant's service staff. Jacques had grown up in a working-class family in suburban Paris and had worked his way into the prestigious position at Le Grand Véfour through determination and a genuine appreciation for fine dining and hospitality excellence. However, Jacques' background had also left him with certain assumptions about wealth and social status that sometimes influenced how he interacted with customers. In his experience, people with serious money announced their affluence through expensive clothing, luxury accessories, and obvious displays of wealth. This perspective, while understandable, was not well suited to the subtle sophistication that characterized many of Le Grand Véfour's most distinguished guests. At approximately 8:30 p.m., as the evening service was reaching its peak, Alain Delon approached the restaurant's entrance. At 39, he was at the height of his international career, having established himself not just as a major film star, but as a sophisticated businessman with interests that extended far beyond the entertainment industry. But on this particular evening, Alain was dressed in the kind of understated elegance that characterized his personal style when he was not making public appearances. He wore a simple but perfectly tailored dark suit, quality leather shoes that spoke of craftsmanship rather than ostentation, and a classic overcoat that was clearly expensive but not obviously branded or flashy. To someone unfamiliar with the subtle markers of genuine quality and sophistication, Alain's appearance might have suggested a well-dressed professional rather than one of France's most successful entertainers and a man whose business investments had made him genuinely wealthy, independent of his film career. As Alain entered the restaurant, he was greeted by Jacques, who was covering the host station while Henri attended to a table of particularly important guests. Jacques looked at Alain with the kind of quick assessment that service professionals often make when determining how to prioritize their attention and resources. What Jacques saw was a man who appeared to be in his late 30s, dressed nicely but not ostentatiously, without obvious signs of extraordinary wealth or social prominence. Based on his limited experience and his assumptions about how truly wealthy people presented themselves, Jacques concluded that this was probably someone who had made a reservation without fully understanding Le Grand Vefour's pricing structure and clientele expectations. "Bonsoir, monsieur," Jacques said, his tone polite but carrying a subtle note of caution. "Do you have a reservation this evening?" Alain smiled pleasantly and provided the name under which his table had been booked. Jacques consulted the reservation list and found the entry, noting that it was for a single diner at one of the restaurant's premium tables. The reservation had been made through the restaurant's concierge service, which often handled bookings for important guests who valued discretion. But rather than assuming that the reservation indicated a guest of particular importance, Jacques' inexperience led him to a different conclusion. In his mind, someone truly wealthy and sophisticated would have made the reservation personally or through a well-known personal assistant, not through a general concierge service. "Monsieur," Jacques said, his voice taking on what he believed was a helpful and informative tone, "I want to make sure you understand that Le Grand Vefour is a very expensive restaurant. Our tasting menu is 400 francs per person, and wine pairings add another 200 francs. With tax and service, dinner for one easily exceeds 700 francs. The comment was intended to be considerate, giving Alain an opportunity to reconsider if the expense was beyond his budget. But what Jacques had actually done was make a devastating assumption about Alain's economic status based entirely on his understated appearance. The dining room began to take notice of the conversation occurring at the entrance. Several guests looked up from their meals, recognizing both the awkwardness of the situation and, in some cases, the identity of the guest who was being questioned about his ability to afford the restaurant's prices. Alain's response was characteristically measured and polite, but those who knew him well would have recognized the slight shift in his expression that indicated he was processing something unexpected and not entirely pleasant. "I appreciate your concern," Alain replied, his voice calm and pleasant, "but I believe I can manage the expense." But Jacques, perhaps encouraged by what he interpreted as polite acceptance of his advice, decided to continue his helpful intervention. "Monsieur, I have been working in restaurants for several years, and I have seen many people become very upset when they receive their bill and realize how expensive their meal has been. Le Grand Vefour is really designed for a very particular clientele: business leaders, politicians, celebrities, people who are accustomed to this level of expense. Perhaps I could recommend some excellent restaurants in the Marais district that offer outstanding French cuisine at more accessible prices." The suggestion that Alain might be more comfortable at a less expensive restaurant was the final element in what had become a completely inappropriate assessment of a guest's economic status and social suitability.
Jacques had not just questioned Alain's ability to pay for his meal, he had suggested that he didn't belong among Le Grand Vefour's usual clientele.
By this point, the conversation had attracted the attention of Henri, who was approaching the entrance to see what was causing the unusual delay in seating a guest. As soon as he saw Alain, Henri's expression changed from curiosity to alarm as he recognized both the identity of the guest and the likely nature of the problem that was developing. But before Henri could intervene, Alain made a decision that would transform the awkward situation into one of the most educational moments in Le Grand Vefour's long history. "Jacques," Alain said quietly, using the waiter's name, which was embroidered on his uniform vest, "I think there may be some confusion here that we should clear up." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a leather portfolio that contained various business documents he had been reviewing earlier in the day. From this portfolio, he removed a set of papers that he handed to Jacques with the same calm politeness he had maintained throughout their conversation. "These are the partnership documents for Le Grand Vefour," Alain explained, his voice remaining conversational and friendly. "As you can see, I became a silent partner in this restaurant last year, which means that I don't just dine here occasionally, I actually own a significant portion of the establishment you're concerned I can't afford." The impact of this revelation was immediate and devastating. Jacques looked down at the documents with growing horror, seeing official letterheads, legal signatures, and most importantly, Alain Delon's name listed as a principal investor in the restaurant where Jacques was questioning his ability to pay for dinner. But the full magnitude of Jacques' mistake was not yet complete. As word of what was happening spread through the dining room, other guests began to realize what they were witnessing. Several diners who had recognized Alain from the beginning were watching with fascination as one of France's most successful entertainers and businessmen handled being treated as if he were an inappropriate guest at his own restaurant. Henri, who had reached the entrance and heard enough of the conversation to understand what had occurred, was experiencing the kind of professional mortification that restaurant managers have nightmares about. One of his employees had just questioned the economic status of a man who was not only one of France's most recognizable celebrities, but also one of the restaurant's actual owners. The dining room fell into the kind of complete silence that occurs when people recognize they are witnessing something extraordinary. The sophisticated conversations about politics and culture were forgotten as everyone present focused on the scene unfolding at the restaurant's entrance. Alain's response to Jacques' mortification demonstrated exactly the kind of grace and character that had made him respected far beyond his entertainment career. Rather than using the situation to humiliate the young waiter or to demonstrate his own importance, he chose a response that reflected both his personal dignity and his understanding of how such situations should be handled. "Jacques," he said gently, "I can see that you were trying to be helpful and considerate, and I appreciate that intention. However, this situation illustrates something important about making assumptions about people based on their appearance or how they choose to present themselves." He gestured slightly toward his understated attire. "In France, we have a tradition of discretion when it comes to displaying wealth or status. Many of the most successful people you will encounter choose elegance over ostentation, quality over obvious luxury. Learning to recognize genuine sophistication rather than just obvious displays of wealth will make you much more effective in hospitality." The educational moment was delivered without condescension or vindictiveness, but with the kind of authority that made it clear this was not merely a suggestion, but a fundamental expectation about how guests should be treated. Henri immediately stepped forward to address the situation with the professionalism that had made him successful in his position.
Monsieur Delon, I please accept my sincere apologies for this misunderstanding. Jacques is relatively new to our staff, and clearly we need to provide better training about recognizing and respecting all of our guests. Alain nodded graciously toward Henri while maintaining his focus on the educational opportunity the situation presented.
Henri, I think this actually provides an excellent training opportunity for your entire staff, he said. Perhaps you could use this incident to remind everyone that Le Grand Vefour's reputation is built on treating every guest with equal respect, regardless of how they appear or how we think they might fit into our assumptions about appropriate clientele. The response was so perfectly handled that it transformed what could have been a humiliating incident for the restaurant into a valuable lesson about hospitality, respect, and the importance of not making economic assumptions about guests. Word of what became known as the Le Grand Vefour lesson spread quickly through Parisian hospitality circles and eventually throughout French society. The story was particularly popular because it demonstrated both the pitfalls of making assumptions about people's economic status and the gracious way that such situations could be handled by those with genuine class and character. For Jacques personally, the incident became a transformative experience that fundamentally changed his approach to hospitality and his understanding of how wealth and sophistication actually present themselves in French society. He would later say that the lesson he learned that evening made him a much more effective and successful hospitality professional. The incident also enhanced Henri's reputation as not just a successful entertainer and businessman, but as someone who understood how to use moments of potential conflict as opportunities for education and cultural understanding. If this incredible story of assumptions meeting reality has entertained you and educated you, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to understand that true wealth and sophistication often choose discretion over display, and that making assumptions about people's economic status based on appearance can lead to embarrassing mistakes. Tell us in the comments about times when you've witnessed someone's assumptions about wealth or status being corrected in surprising ways, because sometimes the most important lessons about respect and humility come when we discover that our judgments about others reveal more about our own limitations than about the people we're judging. The aftermath of the Le Grand Vefour lesson had far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond that single evening in October 1975. Within days of the incident, the story had spread throughout Paris's hospitality industry, becoming a legendary example of how assumptions about guests could lead to professionally embarrassing situations. Henri used the incident as the foundation for a comprehensive training program that became a model for other prestigious restaurants throughout France. The program focused specifically on teaching staff to recognize that genuine wealth and sophistication often express themselves through understatement rather than ostentation, and that French cultural values traditionally favored discretion over obvious displays of affluence. For the restaurant industry more broadly, the incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of making economic assumptions about customers based on appearance. Many establishments began implementing training programs that emphasized treating all guests with equal respect while recognizing that their most valuable customers might not always announce their status through obvious visual cues. The story also had a significant impact on French business culture, particularly in discussions about the difference between American and European approaches to displaying wealth and success. Business schools began using the incident as a case study in cultural sophistication and the importance of understanding different approaches to expressing economic achievement. For Henri personally, the incident further enhanced his reputation as someone who embodied the best qualities of French cultural sophistication. His ability to transform a potentially humiliating situation into an educational opportunity demonstrated exactly the kind of character and grace that made him respected far beyond his entertainment career.
Jacques, the young waiter whose assumptions had created the situation, later became one of the most successful hospitality professionals in Paris. He would often credit his encounter with Henri as the moment that taught him to look beyond surface appearances and to understand the subtle markers of genuine quality and sophistication that characterize French society's most distinguished members. The Le Grand Vefour lesson also became a favorite story among French cultural critics and social commentators as a perfect illustration of how true class and sophistication differ from mere wealth or status display. The incident demonstrated that true cultural refinement lies not in announcing one's achievements, but in how one handles both success and unexpected challenges with dignity and grace.